it was 200 million pounds of demand this year, the backdrop of 155 million pounds. I think it's going to be a sustained bull market and for years to come. We have two high-grade assets that we're exploring right now, actively drilling. It's the highest grade depository of uranium in the world. You know, a lot of these guys just want to do business with guys they want to grab a beer with or something. Do things that make you uncomfortable.
Today we're going to have a conversation that's a little bit different. I'm here with Nick from Skyharbour Resources. He's an investor relations manager there, and the purpose of this conversation is to really give you a behind the scenes of what goes on with a public company. Because there's the actual process of running a company, drilling, mining, building a product, selling a service, but there's a whole nother side of it when you're publicly traded, where you're managing your perception of your company towards investors, you're reaching out to new investors, and you're looking to support your existing shareholders and keep them up to date with the company's developments. Because I'm sure, as you know about yourself, I know about myself, I have a short attention span, I forget about things. If somebody like Nick isn't following up with me on what Skyharbour is doing, it's not going to be at the top of my mind. So we're going to sit down and talk about the significance of this IR segment for public companies, how we kind of think it's changing in the future, and also get to know some of Nick's experience getting into IR. Because, you know, up until recently, there were a lot of gray hairs in this space, and it's kind of nice to see younger people jump in, and I think there's a reason behind it, but we'll get into that. So without going too much more into the future of this podcast, Nick, it's great to have you.
Love it, man. Like I was saying, it's first podcast experience, so it's cool to be here.
I'm glad I'm the one to pop your cherry.
Love it. I love it, man.
So, you know, we talked a little bit before getting into and sitting down. We talked about how you got into IR because it wasn't a career that you had kind of targeted in high school, right? As something you wanted to do. So tell me a bit about that story. Like what made you attracted into it, and how did you even find out this exists?
Yeah, good question. I think IR is a funny thing. I feel like not a lot of people who are in IR expect to be in IR. It kind of just happens. So I was graduating Simon Fraser University, got a degree or bachelor's in business, specialty in finance, and I always kind of knew I wanted to do something in capital markets. My dad was involved in the space for a numerous amount of years, and I always saw what he was doing, you know, with mining companies. He was more so on the deal side of things, but I always knew I kind of wanted to do something like him, kind of follow his footsteps. But I didn't really know how to, you know, I didn't really have a good entry point.
Right.
You know, he wasn't really offering positions. You know, I was kind of just, you know, having him mentor me a little bit. But fortunate for me, I had a friend of mine who was a nanny to a corporate secretary who was actually in the capital market space, the junior mining space, doing a lot of corporate secretary type stuff for these companies. And she knew I was graduating school soon. She's like, hey, I'm kind of swamped. Would you want to kind of be my assistant, help me out a little bit? She's like, you know, it doesn't have to be full-time, can be part-time while you're in school wrapping up. I'm like, perfect. So I ended up actually working for her for about a year, learned a lot of the back-end stuff, how these companies operate, kind of what goes into these junior mining companies that are publicly listed. And then eventually she got hired by a uranium exploration company, now Skyharbour. And you know, they wanted her in the office, and she asked me, hey, is this cool? I know you're still in school, but this is a good opportunity. I was obviously all for it, and ended up going into their office, got to know the CEO and the management team. And then unfortunately COVID hit, times got a bit weird. She needed someone full time, and I was still wrapping up school, so I was like, you know what, I'll take a bit of a step back, wrap up school, but I still had a relationship with the guys at Skyharbour and their management team, and eventually ended up getting on as a corporate communications manager there. That was around 4 years ago, working part-time, eventually got a full-time gig there, and you know, I've been investor relations manager ever since. So it's kind of funny how it all happened, but very, very grateful, and it's been kind of a crazy experience, and learned a lot, met a lot of great people along the way, and still meeting a lot of great people, and that's kind of my gig now. So
I was looking at a stat that said, because I was trying to get an idea of the size of the IR industry, and it's hard to measure because it's one that kind of gets mixed in. If you're a revenue producing company, it gets mixed in with like your marketing budget, with your other budgets. So it's hard to look from the outside and say, okay, how big is this space?
Yeah.
But I got a number of around 20 billion, and I think that that's even small.
Yeah.
Like, I really think when you look at the amount of money that's put in towards investor relations and making sure investors are up to date and finding new investors and going on conferences and going on like a lot of travel expenses, right? That would be that would be in that bucket. but are not being tracked.
Yeah.
Right? For that reason, for that category. So there's also not a lot about what IR is. If you Google what is investor relations, you get like a vague
broad spectrum.
Yeah.
It's I get that question a lot. Even like friends who aren't even in, you really know the capital market space or what have you. I always get asked like, what is investor relations? And I kind of just like, sometimes there's a result of saying finance.
Yeah.
Because it's just like the ease the pain of going into this like long detailed answer. But I think that especially in our space, there's a lot of things. Like there's a lot of admin stuff where it can be corporate presentations, news releases, updating websites, social media. That's a part of it. But also I think the biggest thing is getting in front of potential investors, whether that be doing the one-on-one meetings, going to conferences, doing road shows, working really closely with your CEO, understanding what the message you want to portray is, and communicating that message to the masses. And also, current shareholders that are involved with the company, making sure they're always up to date. I think it's always good to have like a pulse on things, right? Because I know some companies who don't have in-house IR guys, or even have, a smaller cap company who just has a CEO that is kind of running the show.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep in contact with these shareholders on a consistent basis. And I think that's where a guy like me can come in, or an investor relations manager can come in, and making sure you're making those calls either every week or every couple weeks, or if there's a significant news release, just so that they know that you're taking care of them. You're providing updates. They're not just a forgotten soldier, in the company. I think obviously, we aren't revenue generating, a revenue generating company. We obviously we do capital raises, and we have these guys giving us their money. We want to make sure that they're always informed of what's going on, and I think that's where I can come in and nourish those relationships, nurse them, and continue building them moving forward as the company grows.
And it's important because I want to take a step back, because your role in IR is a result of a need, and so the need is like there's a lot of these shareholders who have supported the company. But the reason it matters for a public company, I feel like this is something that's overlooked, because a lot of people just look at the market and they say, oh, things trade, right? But on the end of every trade, except the bots, there's a person, right? And so you have to get that person to want to buy, and then there has to be a person who's willing to sell. And so, the role of investor relations really comes because share price is influenced by the supply and demand of the stock,
right? Not
the supply and demand of the company's product necessarily, right? And so we have situations where these companies are, if you're not a Fortune 500 company, most retail investors don't know you exist.
Yeah.
Most investors don't know you exist, right? So we have to do this exercise of going out there and saying, here's our company, here's what we're doing, here's why it matters, here's why you should hold, or here's why, reasons you could sell, reasons you could buy. Like, we have to manage this public perception of the stock, because that's what influences, to a certain extent, the share price.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's what's overlooked by a lot of people. Yeah. Right? Because they just think it happens.
No, it's a lot of groundwork. It's a lot of getting your story out there, whether it be social media, doing video interviews, doing podcasts like this, or like small little snippets that you post on, whether it be Twitter, YouTube, Instagram Reels, whatever. I think that's another cool thing about being a younger guy too. You can kind of you have a better you can navigate these other kind of social media platforms and understand what works and what doesn't work. I think it's really tough right now to get a younger audience excited about junior mining. That's kind of a task that I like to take on. How do I kind of differentiate ourselves from other sectors or whatnot? It is hard to get people on board, especially with all the stuff going on with Bitcoin and crypto and all that type of stuff. But it is one of those things that you just got to keep at it. And I think you got to really tell the story of why this is important. The money that can be made obviously is one thing, but just, it's important to invest in these type of companies that are looking for, whether it be uranium deposits, gold, silver, what have you. I think it is really important. And there's a lot of value behind that, and just really getting that message out there to the masses. And in order to do that, go to conferences, road shows, like I mentioned, face-to-face, meetings, what have you. It's just really important to always have that foot on that IR pedal, right? Just keep getting the message out. And you don't want to shove it down people's throats, but you also got to gauge, like, hey, how often am I going to go out and do these type of conferences or what have you? But or if someone were to give you a phone call, always return the call. Just always just make sure you nurse those those kind of relationships and make sure you get the messaging out properly.
Yeah, and I think it's also tricky because the space, the space isn't well known, and because it's well known, there's not a lot of information out there.
Yeah.
And so part of like the purpose why we wanted to sit down, and we talked about this on the phone, is basically talk about like what's working, what's not working, like compare notes, share information, because IR seems to be something that a lot of people are shooting in the dark on, right? Like we have the basics, hit the phones, talk to investors.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, like how do we get the younger audience interested, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you maybe a little bit what worked for me, not necessarily just in the whole IR perspective, but just growing the network. Because I think if you have a large network, you can kind of catapult into meeting other people who may be interested in the story. But when I first started out, the main thing for me was, how do I grow this network? Like everyone always said, it's so important to have a network. And I was a younger guy, and it's just like, I think this was like 4 years ago, and I was kind of a bit overwhelmed with it because I was, I'm more extroverted now than when I was. But I'm like, how do you just go to a meeting or get a coffee meeting with a broker or someone who's a portfolio manager? Like, how does this happen? And I found what was really useful for me was LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn still to this day very, very frequently. And I always just, search up, the brokerages or individuals that I've heard of or whatever, what have you, connected with them on LinkedIn, and would always add like a personal note.
Smart. Yeah.
I would just be like, hey, I'm so-and-so, just, a younger guy in the space, really think it'd be beneficial to connect or what have you. I forget what message exactly I use, but I was getting meetings, like coffee meetings, and just, it wasn't me pitching a story or whatever. It was just more, hey, I'm a young guy, eager to learn, just want to sit down with you, maybe tell me your story, and we'll love to keep up to date. And that's how I slowly started to build my network. And ever since then, I've gotten the opportunity to meet a lot of great people, a lot of younger guys in the space now too, who I was back in the day would be, oh my God, how am I ever going to meet this guy too? We're going to grab either coffee or beers after work, and I can shoot him a text whenever, and we're hanging out or what have you. So it's really cool in that aspect, and I think it's just really important to get out of your comfort zone, find new ways to connect with guys, whether it be LinkedIn or even just picking up the phone too. I think that's kind of a lost art as well, especially for younger people. They don't necessarily want to dial a phone and talk to the person on the other line because they think it's either going to be weird or they get nervous. It's
just a mental block.
It's a mental block, and that's where I always express this to younger guys now, is do things that make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like there's been so many times where I'll be gearing up for a meeting and I'm like, man, I don't really want to do this. Like I'm kind of nervous, and then you have all these negative thoughts flood your head. Every time I've gone through with the meeting or had the conversation or done whatever the interview, what have you, I've always walked out of there being like, I'm so happy I did that.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, you never know who you're going to, after the conversation, what's going to come from it, or hey, I know this guy who'd be great for you to connect with. There's so many doors that open. So I always stress that, and I think that's, again, something that IR guys or IR professionals, male, female, whatever have you, they need to do that. I think it's important. And that's been beneficial to me, and that's how I've kind of gotten to where I am now, of just getting out there, talking to people, being your authentic self. Don't always push a story. Yeah. Just, have a conversation. I think people
build that bond, have that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And like everyone I talk to, especially brokers and stuff, they don't want a guy, they get deals across their desk all the time.
Yeah.
This is kind of a funny, I was talking to a buddy about this recently. It was just, a lot of these guys just want to do business with guys they want to grab a beer with or something. You know, you build that relationship. It's not strenuous. It's easy. And then once you have that initial bond, you can be like, hey, I'm working on this great deal, or hey, you should take a look at this. And they're way more inclined to do that. Yeah. Right. So I think that's a big thing I've learned over the last couple of years. It's been beneficial to me, and I think that's definitely helped me along the way.
Sometimes that patience is key, right?
Yeah.
And especially because like I think about, I've been thinking about this in IR. It's like you have different segments, right, in your persona of an investor. Mm-hmm. Like you've got the retail investor, who's like a generalist online on Twitter, looking at blogs on CEO.ca, wherever they are. And then you've got like the institutions, so fund managers, brokers, portfolio managers. These people have, they will make the buy decision. You can't convince them, right? all you can do is you can see if you can get in front of them to then have the opportunity to present the opportunity. But you can't sell them one way or another. They're smart enough to figure it out for themselves.
The big challenge, I think, though, like, is the retail. Because I'm not going to go grab a bunch of coffees and drinks with, it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard to do at scale.
It is hard to do at scale, and that's why you have like maybe some larger, marketing groups that and I deal. That's another part of the IR gig that I do with Skyharbour is, handling these third-party marketing groups, really understanding what works and what doesn't. It's hard to gauge, especially nowadays, to what really works. But you really got to be careful too, because some of these programs aren't cheap. But that is a way to try to gauge or get out to the masses in regards to retail and stuff like that. But that's another code I'm trying to crack, is how do I better get in front of retail guys and the everyday investor who may not be too familiar about junior mining stocks or what have you. But I think that again goes to show it's important to get out there, whether it be conferences, for example. Like I know VRIC's coming up.
Yeah,
a lot of retail guys walking around there, and I think another thing too is for the retail is always make yourself available, because I know some companies too, guys, I see it on CEO.ca, where it's like I try to call the company, I left the message, no return call, this and that. Whenever I get a call missed, sometimes it can be just like a telemarketer or what have you, or some marketing group. I don't care. I'll always return it. Always return the call. And there's guys that are super gracious. They're like, hey man, thanks for returning the call. Really appreciate it. I think it just goes to show that you care. Right, I think that's a big thing in this industry too. Is like you keep in touch,
and that builds trust.
Yeah.
Right, which is the cornerstone of an investor. They have to trust you, and they have to trust your company.
Yeah.
So that's a huge insight. Yeah, be available. Like I remember I talked to one shareholder who he called him back, and he's like, oh, it's great to hear from you guys. I love how in touch you guys are.
Yeah.
And he was like really humble, really nice about it. Turns out he's like a major shareholder.
You never know who you're exactly.
Holds millions of shares.
Yeah.
Like his net worth is like so much larger than I'm going to be in the next few years.
Yeah.
Right? And he's like all like thankful that I called him back.
Yeah, it
makes a difference.
I think it's the little things too. Like you just, and that goes to show. I think it's just just be a good person.
Yeah.
People want to do. I think for the most part, people want to do work with good people.
Yeah.
Don't try to big dog anyone where it's like I'm too busy to return their call. I think everyone's busy, but that's part of the gig of investor relations. You're the guy that's the phone number is attached to news releases or on the website. Just be available. It's your job, and I think it's a very little thing that people may miss.
Yeah.
But again, it's just being in touch with whatever it be retail or anyone trying to get a hold of you in regards to questions on the company. It's just having that pulse on. Staying in touch, it's a big important thing.
So what do you think is the challenge in getting in front of the generalist retail investor, the one who's online and scrolling? Like, is it the communication style? Is it that they don't understand mining? Like, where do you think the problem lies?
I think it's a multitude of things. I think it's a big educational process of really relaying the message of why it's important. I think that an issue with the younger audience is everyone's wants the quick in and out.
Yeah.
Junior mining's, a lot of these, it takes a long time to make a discovery. The exploration gains, especially after a discovery to productions, could be 10 years, for example.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the audience or younger audience wants, if I put money into a deal, 2 weeks later I want 3x
like all
my money.
These meme coins you
yeah,
see.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and especially with crypto and Bitcoin ripping, like a lot of guys or a lot of individuals who are younger don't really want to bat an eye at junior mining. So I think it's an educational process of why it's important. That's a big thing, and I think that's where we're kind of losing some of the younger audience in regards to putting their money or capital into the space. To be honest with you, and it's how to change that. It's education, I guess. It's
a process.
It's a process.
Yeah. But it's definitely interesting because I think a part of it too is like you almost have to be burned once.
Yeah.
Like you have to go into one of these crypto things, and you have to go in one of these meme coins, like the Hoktoa Girl meme coin.
Oh, jeez.
That went to a $500 million market cap.
Yeah. It's
and you gotta get burned, because then you realize, what, I can't just invest in Ponzi schemes. Like I really need to think about value. Like if I want to generate long-term long-term wealth, I need to think about long-term value.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that, sometimes opportunity is disguised as misfortune. And so like as these things play out with crypto and things go up and down, I think we'll see that there's more people who are cautious and do more research into what they want to put their money into.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying crypto as a whole is a bad thing. I just think that the whole like meme and pump culture of it is very reminiscent of how the stock market started. When you talk to older guys about like back in the day, there's a lot of things that are similar, and it's just at an earlier phase.
And I think though too, like a lot of you want to focus on, you're not just the stories aren't just pump and dump. Like if you want to build an actual company, it takes time. You're not gonna if you're raising capital to do a drill program, for example. I feel like nowadays people expect, oh well, they're drilling. Once assays come out, they're going to hit something spectacular. The stock's going to go from 20 cents to 80 cents, right? Like that.
Yeah.
These things take time. And then if you do eventually find a large resource or deposit, things can change pretty quick. But again, it's very difficult. Junior exploration is very difficult. It's very risky. It's 1 in a million chance you find something great, but you want to position yourself and diversify a little bit to hopefully get involved with really good companies who are doing great work, whether it be great management team, great exploration, or geologists behind it that can really increase your chances. But I think it's a lot of doing your homework, talking to management, talking to IR guys, and understanding what the story's about, and then kind of growing your portfolio that way to hopefully make some money in the space. But it's very, very rare where it's a quick win.
There's no quick wins in real business.
Yeah,
Even in
exactly.
tech, you look at any tech company, like Reddit was a 14-year process before it went public. Like these things take time. Stripe still isn't public. I think they're over 10 years old now.
Yeah.
Like it takes time to build great companies. And what's unique though, I think about junior mining that's overlooked is every other industry, you don't have an opportunity to invest in these companies as a Joe Blow in your house. Like these are publicly traded. Anybody can get in, and it's like getting into the seed round of a Y Combinator company. If you pick the right group of people and you're in the right audience and you're listening to what they're saying, then you can get into these opportunities at a really early stage, and you can ride that same venture capital run that you get in tech. But those are exclusive. This one's available to everyone, right?
And that's the thing too. It's just like even right now, like before I came here, I looked at some of the stocks that are on my stock watch list, and it's getting hit hard because of tax loss. And I'm like, a lot of these companies are good companies.
Yeah.
They're on sale right now. So that's when I'll call some buddies up and be like, hey, just you taking a look at this and that, and it's a good entry point.
Like it's low, yeah.
Yeah, it's low. So it's just kind of doing your research and kind of finding what's right for you. But again, it's not a short-term game. It's a long-term game, and you kind of got to wait it out. But you also too, that's where again, guys like myself who are in IR, if I do tell someone about a company, or if I'm a Skyharbour shareholder reaches out and they're kind of like, okay, what's going on? You can always just keep them relaxed and be like, hey, this is what's going on. It's going to take some time, this and that, but just nurturing that kind of relationship and making sure that they're comfortable, because they got to understand it's not a quick fix. It's
and then they trust your words, right?
Yeah,
you guys over time are going to continue to deliver.
Yeah,
because I think it's funny too, because the whole reason this industry exists, this industry does not exist for the sole purpose of making money. This industry exists because we need the resources. Making money is a byproduct of getting the resource to a point where people can use it. Right? And I think that's what makes it valuable, and that's what has made it last all these years. You need metals, you need copper, you need uranium. Like Skyharbour right now with uranium, right? There's a global uranium shortage.
Yeah, it's a big supply-demand deficit. I think it was 200 million pounds of demand this year, the backdrop of 155 million pounds primary mine supply, and typically met with like secondary sources of supply, but a lot of near-term production is not going to fulfill that gap. Hence why we're so bullish on uranium, and I think it's going to be a sustained bull market and for years to come, right? So that's kind of where we're so excited, and I think that's why the Athabasca Basin, being what it is, highest grade depository of uranium in the world, that's why we're so excited to be operating out of there, and thinking it can add a lot of value down the line for sure, because definitely an interesting place to be having projects and operating right now.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have a good environment, right? There's a shortage of uranium that's not going to be met by even bringing on near-term producers.
And a lot of the producers right now are having difficulty hitting numbers. Like you see Cameco, Paladin, they have these production targets, but they haven't been meeting them. So even the production that's supposed to be coming online, a lot of those aren't meeting the targets. And again, it kind of goes to show it's not easy to produce uranium.
Yeah.
It's not easy to hit those targets. So I think it kind of positions companies well that are uranium companies and in the future. So
that supply deficit might even be greater than we're expecting because we might not even hit the production targets
and also
that we're
too,
expecting.
It's been fun too because you have big tech coming into the space as well.
Really?
Yeah, you have like Amazon, Google, Meta, for example, looking to power their data centers with nuclear energy. So that's going to be a big factor moving forward as well. You have SMRs kind of coming into the mix. So a few years ago that was more of a pipe dream, but now they're getting actually into development. So there's a lot of factors that are really going to be increasing the demand of uranium, but there's not really an answer when it comes to supply. So it's going to make for a very interesting few years, I think, personally, for the commodity.
So with like Skyharbour, are you guys trying to position yourself for that shortage? Like, are you guys you're exploring for uranium and then hoping that by the time that shortage kind of hits its peak, you guys are
I think the whole macro thesis that it's very compelling supply demand fundamentals. It's already there. We know that. We in having a bunch of projects in the Athabasca Basin, we know how valuable it is to make a large discovery in the Athabasca. So we think we're setting ourselves up very well, especially into the future. We have 2 high-grade assets that we're exploring right now, actively drilling.
And real quick, Athabasca Basin, what is that?
It's in northern Saskatchewan.
Okay.
It's the highest grade depository of uranium in the world. So think what oil is in Saudi Arabia is what kind of uranium is in the Athabasca Basin. It's very, very high grades, something that's not matched in the rest of the world. It's also, again, located in Saskatchewan, which is a very favorable mining jurisdiction. So if you're a uranium exploration company, really the Athabasca Basin is the place to be. There's been very notable discoveries there. Cameco, the McArthur River mine there, NextGen with their Arrow deposit. If
these are billion-dollar discoveries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. So we really are in the best place to be looking for these type of deposits. For Skyharbour specifically, we have 29 projects there.
Wow.
So over 1.4 million acres of mineral tenure, so 3rd largest landholder now in the region.
Wow.
Projects ranging from more advanced stage assets all the way to earlier stage secondary assets. So we really have pretty much every nook and cranny of the basin covered. For us specifically, we've been very active in drilling. Both Russell and Moore Lake are 2 kind of co-flagship projects, both advanced stage. We like to say discovery ready.
Yeah.
So we, again, been actively drilling those projects throughout the year. Assays pending for both programs. Just wrapping up the one last program at Russell Lake, a 4,500 meter program. That's going to lead us into 2025. But we're confident that we could be that next big discovery story in the basin, and to contribute to the supply in the future. We're not looking to be a producing company or development company. We're strictly exploration and would like to be part of a larger corporate transaction if we were to ever find a big discovery. But that said, we think we're very well positioned with what we have going on right now. We have great strategic partners in Denison Mines as our largest corporate shareholder. We have Rio Tinto now as a shareholder, and we also have a strategic partner in Orano, which is France's largest uranium and nuclear fuel company at our Preston project. So that's a kind of a good leadway into, we have a multifaceted business model. So we have focused exploration at Russell Moore.
Okay.
So we fund all the exploration there. We've been actively drilling those projects, but we also have prospect generation. So essentially what we do is we bring in partner companies to advance their secondary assets. So they pay us in cash and shares on an annual basis per their earn-in agreement, and then they also fund all the exploration at the project. So it's like if you were to invest in Skyharbour, you get access to what we're doing at our core projects, kind of the discovery-ready assets, but you also on the back end get these 10 partner companies now advancing the secondary assets as well. So multiple irons in the fire, and it keeps for a catalyst-rich, heavy news flow kind of story in Skyharbour.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's a good way to keep your fingers in other things that are developing while still building what you have. And so with you at Skyharbour. How do you feel about the IR space? I mean, you kind of stumbled into it.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have a long-term perspective with the way that you approach your networking. Like you weren't in there to try to get like a quick fix and get
No,
it.
I
get
love
out.
it.
Yeah.
I love it, man. It's been unexpected journey, but I think I've worked really hard at getting out there to the masses. We were telling you before, I was very introverted as a young guy. As I've kind of grown, the confidence has grown. I love to go and get in front of people and tell my story and try to tell the story of Skyharbour and any company I'm working for. I think it leads to, there's a lot of doors that can open and opportunities that can open through just, you never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah.
That's what I love. Like you could, whether it be at a conference and you're at dinner with someone and you just meet them and your stories align and you build a relationship that could lead to something great. Like you just never know.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that the IR space has given me, and companies like Skyharbour and guys like Jordan Trimble, who's the CEO of Skyharbour, has been a great mentor to me, and it's been really fun. Learned a lot so far, and I'm really excited to see what the future has in store.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we got a chance to sit down and kind of bounce some ideas, and I think it'll be cool to see a few things to figure out. It seems like the parts of the industry that are refined or that you've got a good take on. I like the LinkedIn approach for getting to institutions and brokers.
Highly recommend
Smart.
that. Highly recommend
Very
that.
smart. Yeah, because they get to see who you are in your bio when you reach out to them. It's not just a cold email.
And they get on a lot of people have it on their phone too, so it's like a little message, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people get LinkedIn messages, but it's just an approach that's really worked for me versus just spamming someone's email, because you know how it is. Sometimes you email someone, you get an email yourself from like junk, right, or spam, whatever. So I think it's kind of a different approach.
It's kind of been overrun where LinkedIn is still fresh.
Yeah.
And it's a real person because you got the profile.
Yeah.
So
make sure you have a good profile picture too. You gotta look good.
I gotta fix that one. I look like I'm on vacation.
You're good.
But the other thing that we got to figure out that next time we chat, we'll maybe circle back on is how do we get more general retail in there? How do we measure IR more effectively when it comes to getting those retail audiences?
Yeah,
because like you said, those campaigns are not cheap.
They aren't cheap. Yeah, you got to be kind of think outside the box a little bit of how you're going to get your message out to the wider audience, right? And I think it's a lot of getting out there and maybe talking to some other IR guys and what's worked for them as well. I think it should be a community, right? If I know another IR guy in the space or a group that's been working and helping a company with IR, it's good to kind of share ideas, and because at the end of the day, we want these companies to succeed and also want more of a general audience investing in junior mining. So I think it's really important. Yeah,
the more you expand that audience, the more opportunity it gives for all companies, right?
Exactly.
Especially in an industry where you're working with something that's so much of a necessity.
Yeah,
right? It's
absolutely.
The thing that everything is built from. So, yeah, no, it was a pleasure to have you, man.
Thanks, man.
I'm looking forward to the next time we sit down.
Me too. Awesome,
Thank you.
buddy. Appreciate it.
Cheers.